Of all the whitetail states across the country, well, Nebraska isn't necessarily known for their big whitetails, but they have a ton of deer. Now this is an area that I've hunted for a couple of years now. It's near Chadron, Nebraska, which is in the northwestern part of the state. It's an incredible area with wide open spaces that you wouldn't normally think of as whitetail territory, but the whitetails, well, they just come streaming through. Primarily, we were going to be hunting whitetails. That was our #1 goal. But we also had a couple of places that we knew we could go to and potentially see an antelope too. So the first morning, that's where we headed. Now usually you'll see a buck running another buck off, and that's the end of it. But not on this situation. These two antelope locked up and one actually flung the other antelope. And when I say they chased each other, this antelope chased this buck for probably close to a mile. He was so worried about getting this buck off that I know there were probably other ones coming around trying to get his does while he was so busy chasing this one up. Anytime you're doing a hunt in October, well, the weather can change in an instant. And while we were hunting in Nebraska, well, we knew there were cold temperatures, but we also knew that there were some big storms moving our way. Now, a lot of times, this can be absolutely incredible for deer because anytime the pressure changes and there's a front coming in, usually game moves around. And we were hoping that would be the exact case. By the time we got into the field, the front had already started moving in and the snow was beginning to fall. Now we got our decoy up and then we wanted to look for a place to brush in our blind. We wanted an area with good visibility for the decoy, but we needed enough back cover so our blind wouldn't stick out. We figured if we could brush it in enough, find an area with some back cover, that all the deer's attention would hopefully go to our decoy and not to our new blind. Well, we're out here in Nebraska and I think we've hit the perfect weather change. Yesterday we were hunting antelope, it was 75 degrees, and today it's snowing. But we're almost up to Halloween and I'm thinking this might really get these bucks to start rutting. We're gonna sit tight here. Last night we were kind of glassing this area. We spotted 3 really nice bucks in this area. So now we've got an area with good visibility for our buck. We've got an alfalfa field behind, we've got a field in front of us, and our ground blind's pretty well hidden. So we're gonna get in, sit for the afternoon, and hopefully this weather gets the bucks moving. One cool thing about where we're hunting in Nebraska was the fact that I've been here hunting before. In fact, I've been hunting with Craig for several years at Gator Outfitters, and one of the main reasons I keep coming back, well, first off, he has an incredible deer population, but he's also one of the nicest outfitters I've ever met. Now, in the past, we've had incredible luck. In fact, I was here a couple years ago, and I had the opportunity to take several nice antelope. And I missed. And that's the way it works sometimes. But we had a really fun hunt and it was a really great time. Now I've also been here several times hunting whitetails, both late season and earlier in the season. And we had absolutely amazing luck. A lot of how you're hunting in Nebraska is the fact that you sit on these wide open fields and the deer, they just come pouring out of the hills. It's hard to believe that there could be that many deer out in the hills because it looks like it's completely empty. But when it gets closer to dark, the deer just come flooding in. The one thing I had learned with years of hunting out here is the fact that a lot of these deer will hit the big open fields, but it can be tough to try to bring them in close to your blind for an archery shot. So this year, well, it was later in the season, the weather was getting bad, so I thought a decoy would be the perfect solution to bring these bucks in nice and close, hopefully right within archery range. After sitting there for just a short time, well, we had deer starting to come through. So we knew we had a pretty good setup. Now, as we were sitting there, we spotted a nice buck that came in, not quite inside bow range, but he was rubbing a tree, making scrapes, doing all sorts of stuff, and he was mad. Now, I'm pretty sure he could see our decoy, and I thought for sure we'd be able to bring him in. I tried grunting, snort wheeze, all sorts of stuff, but he just wouldn't commit. Once Craig and I got the blind set up, well, the snow had already begun falling and it looked like it had been there for a month. Everything that had a light dusting of snow, well, it matched our blind completely and we were thrilled. In fact, we had a small doe that came right behind our blind. We're talking a couple yards away and she didn't even notice. So we knew we had a pretty good setup. One of the tough parts about having a decoy is sometimes when you have it in an area where there's does around, they don't always like it. And other deer, they may get scared of it as well, but that's okay. We had a smaller buck on the side. He spooked off, but sometimes you think that it's bad because a deer just spooked off, but you gotta remember, that can draw in those big bucks, and that's exactly what happened. I looked over after that smaller buck ran off, and there was a much nicer buck standing right there. He had watched the entire thing. Now this buck, he wasn't quite a shooter. He had kind of thin tines, wasn't quite where we needed him to be, and I was mostly concerned that he wasn't old enough. A beautiful deer, and you know what? I believe the decoy is what brought this guy right in close. With all this action going on around the blind, well, it really confirmed the idea that you can put a ground blind out that same day and hunt it, especially if they have something drawing their attention to somewhere else, like our decoy. The next thing I know, there's a buck headed right behind our decoy. Now, this looked like it was the same buck that was down below just raking that tree, and finally he had gotten the courage, but he still didn't want to come into that decoy. He just kind of skirted around the back. There were does around the decoy, just a perfect live decoy setup. Now, the thing is, I looked over to the right, and there was an even bigger buck, a really nice, old, thicker buck standing there watching all the action. He was just bristled up. This wasn't a monster, but it was a pretty nice looking buck, and he was all about taking that decoy down. I just smoked the blind. He's coming back right now. It's not every day that you get a second follow-up shot on a whitetail, especially when they're at 15 yards. But apparently, well, this was my lucky day. This buck was so locked into the decoy that he had no idea what had just happened. I cannot hardly even believe it. I just had a nice buck come in. We're out here in Nebraska. We put the decoy out. It's been just nasty weather. A buck came into it, posturing just really cool, and I actually missed. I hit the bottom of the blind. My arrow went just tumbling out, and then he decided to come back. There's no way you'd normally get two chances at a whitetail like this, but this guy decided to come back, got another shot, made a good shot. He went bounding off, and it is just awesome. Wow, what a beautiful buck. This has been awesome. I don't care where you're hunting, when you can decoy these bucks in, and to have a miss. I smoked that blind, but luckily that decoy, I mean, it basically saved. How many hunters do you know who've had two shots at a nice mature buck?
Very few, very few.
And he's got pretty good mass throughout. Just a nice deer, and his body size, I mean, his neck's all swollen up. We're almost up till Halloween. I mean, you can tell these bucks are starting to rut. We're here with Gator Outfitters, and we've just had an incredible hunt. Craig, you couldn't get a better outfitter, and just been a lot of fun and great way to end the trip.
Tip of the Week is brought to you by Field & Stream. Trusted brands, timeless traditions.
Decoys are a really fun way to go after whitetails, but there's a few things that you can do in your setup to make you more effective. First off, you want to think about where you're going to place your decoy. Now, even if you just set up a ground blind or you're in a tree stand, I like to have them about 10-15 yards away. What you'll find is it'll take all the deer's attention off your blind and focus it right on your decoy. Now, the reason I like to have it so close is because even if you get a buck that won't fully commit, maybe he's just coming in, checking out that decoy, you can still get potentially a 30-40 yard shot with that setup. Now, the other thing, remember that most bucks are going to try to fight your decoy and come in head on, so plan your shot accordingly. Now, I've also seen bucks stand right in front of that decoy, pawing at the ground, and if that happens, make sure you have a broadside shot to take that animal. Now, the next thing, what you're trying to do when you're using a decoy is basically fool a whitetail's senses. You're fooling 3 senses with a decoy. You've got the sound. When you're rattling, grunting, you're bringing them in. As soon as they come in, they see your decoy. The next step is to fool their sense of smell. Now, the very first thing you need to do, spray your decoy down completely with Scent Killer Gold. That way you can remove any human odor that you may have left on the decoy from setting it up. The next thing I do, I take a bottle of Golden Scrape, pour it on the ground and even on the decoy's hocks. That way, you've got that fresh smell of the scrape in the area. Next, I take Golden Estrus Extreme or Golden Estrus, put it on key wicks around the area, so that way you're also filling the air full of that Golden Estrus smell. So now you've got a wide variety of things, and when you bring those bucks in, don't get too pushy. You're gonna have time. Wait till you get the perfect shot. That's the beauty of a decoy. They are locked in on it. It gives you time to calm your nerves and to get the perfect shot.
Winchester Deadly Passion is presented by Cutty Back Digital, Hard-Hitting Easton Arrows, Hunter's Safety System, Winchester Repeating Arms, Swarovski Optic, Scent Killer Gold with Hunt Dry Technology. Apply it, dry it, and go hunt. Rage Broadheads, leading the evolution in lethal technology. And Golden Triangle Whitetail, your hunt of a lifetime awaits.
Now, I've had some excellent luck hunting out west for whitetails, but it's primarily been in Montana. I had never had the chance to go to Wyoming. Well, I was headed for an early season hunt to 7J Outfitters, which is near Sundance, Wyoming. Now, this area is absolutely beautiful, and the best part is it is loaded up with whitetails. I don't care where you're hunting around the country, a lot of the early season patterns for whitetails, well, they're the same. A lot of these deer are on those regular feeding patterns, and the food plots were going to be a very important role on this hunt. One of the toughest parts about hunting food plots is the fact that you know the deer are going to come out there, you just don't know how they're necessarily going to get there. So your stand placement, well, that is critical. On this hunt, well, our stand was set perfect. We were sitting right there, had a buck walk out, 30-40 yards, just standing broadside right in front of me. Well, we just snuck in this morning really close to this hayfield. We got in this tree nice and quiet, and all the deer were still out there feeding. Now, we knew this was going to be a short sit, but if that had been a big buck, came by between 35 and 40 yards, but just wasn't quite big enough. He was a nice 8, not real long tines, but I think after this we're gonna go. We're gonna meet back up with Ken, gonna hang some new stands for this afternoon, and hopefully we can get something close then. After we got that first stand hung, immediately deer started coming through. Now these deer were coming through close. We had really took time to scout out and find where the trails had met, and the deer were coming right next to us. Now all the shots would have probably been within bow range. The difficulty here, we just didn't have any bucks circulating through. So we knew we had a good setup, but it was still gonna take a little tweaking to find out exactly where those big bucks were hanging out. Wind, well, it can be extremely difficult wherever you're hunting. And of course, on this trip, well, I was running into windy conditions once again. But the thing is, you don't want to quit and you don't want to stay in. You want to get out there and hunt. But there can really be some extra added challenges when you're hunting the wind. Number one, yes, the deer are spooky. They don't like it. Everything is moving. But another thing, we didn't have a huge tree we were in. We were in a great location, but we were really swaying around. And you gotta watch it, because not only will your arrow drift in the wind, but that tree is literally moving you. So your pin may be on that deer 1 minute, the next minute it might be completely off.
Winchester Deadly Passion is presented by Winchester, the American legend. Matthews, catch us if you can. Field and Stream, where traditions begin. ScoutLookWeather.com. Download the free Deer Log app for your smartphone. Moose Utility Division, demand the brand. Bog Pod, versatility defined. M&P by Smith & Wesson. And Peak Antifreeze, right with your car and wallet. Peak, run true. Closed captioning is brought to you by the 4-in-1 Woodsman from Zippo Outdoor.
Now on that extremely windy day, the deer were moving. They were coming back and we were in the perfect position. They were coming right down a fence line, and we had actually tied ribbons trying to prevent them from hopping the fence. We wanted to come all the way down near our stand and hopefully hop the fence there and then feed out in the field on the side of us. Well, it almost worked. We had some does come through and we were talking extremely close. Perfect conditions. Then a buck that looked pretty nice, well, he started coming our way and I was getting nervous. Now this looked like a buck that was extremely good for the area. He was right on the edge, but the dilemma here, it was gonna be the wind. I wasn't sure if I could get a close enough shot. I wanted a 20-yard shot or less. The wind was just too much. The tree stand was swaying. I didn't know how much wind drift I'd have, so I figured if I can get this buck 20 yards and in, I can make it happen. Well, as this deer came, he just never gave me that 20-yard shot. He stayed just outside my range, and on a calm day, it wouldn't be an issue. But on winds like this, you really have to learn to limit yourself, and unfortunately, I let him walk. Hunting in the West, well, one of the nice things is the beautiful scenery. Now out in Wyoming, it is absolutely gorgeous, but one morning, we crawled into a new stand in the dark, and as it got light, it was absolutely a spectacular view. In fact, we could see Devil's Tower right from our stand. We had a beautiful river, kind of creek down below us, and just a really enjoyable sit. We did have a couple of does come right under us. Now this kept our spirits pretty high. I thought, you know what? We've got paths right below us. We've got great scenery. We're just gonna sit it out and see if we can wait, and hopefully a buck will come through. Well, no big deer came in, but it probably was one of the coolest deer stands I'd ever sat in. Now it was down to the wire. This was the last evening of our hunt, and we'd had several close calls. But this evening, as we were getting in on stand, we had a great location, and almost immediately, we had bucks coming out. Well, I glanced over, and there was a nice buck coming in the backside. Now he was coming through the thicker areas, and well, this isn't where I was expecting him, but you know what? This was a shooter, and I don't care where he was. The nice part is, he was coming right towards me, and I had one lane I could shoot. opposite side of what we were thinking. I've been watching the field and he came around the backside. It was right in close by the shoulder. I hope I didn't get that shoulder. It's within an inch of being either a hard shot or right in the shoulder, and at 50 yards is a long shot, but I put it right in there. What an awesome buck. Look at this. Sweet deal. I was so worried on the shot, but he didn't go probably 75 yards. Just a really nice dark chocolate horns, beautiful big bodied deer, just awesome. We've been out here hunting in Wyoming, really put in the time, and tonight it was our last night and this guy came through. We've been out here just moving stands. These guys were hunting with 7J Outfitters. They've just done an incredible job, and I've got a beautiful, beautiful Wyoming buck. My first buck here, and very, very nice, and nothing like waiting till the last minute.